With our broad antifungal response, you're going to be looking at things like antimicrobial peptides being important, neutrophils, which can release reactive oxygen species and other antifungal compounds. Neutrophils and macrophages can also phagocytize some fungi. So I know we typically, when we talk about fungi, we're like, well, they're eukaryotes. They've got to be like really big. How can our cells phagocytize them? Well, a lot of the yeasts and unicellular fungal organisms that are going to cause infection in people, yeah, they're bigger than bacteria, but they're not as big as our cells. So our cells can still go in and do some of that cleanup. We also have really important T helper responses, T helper 17, T helper 1, T helper 2. So we can see that our body is capable of taking care of those infections as well. We're not going to spend a lot of time. You see, this is the only slide really talking about the antifungal response. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about fungal infections, mostly because in the US, fungal infection, like, it's important, but it's not as common as bacterial or viral infection. For the most part, a lot of fungi that cause infection in people cause really, I guess, relatively insignificant infections. So things like athlete's foot. There are definitely some important pathogens that we'll talk about. But again, it's a handful when compared to the number of bacteria and viruses we'll discuss. And we kind of have the same thing with parasites. Parasites aren't terribly common in the US. There are some that we see, and there's something that we'll talk about just because they're interesting, they're possible. We do see them every once in a while. But again, we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about parasites either. But again, we have antiparasitic responses. Our antiparasitic responses are trickier because parasites are even more complex than fungi. So there are some parasites that, yeah, sure, they're unicellular eukaryotic organisms. We could even phagocytize them. But then there are parasites like a tapeworm that can be like 20 feet long. So it's really hard to say broadly, like, this is the antiparasitic response, because what can happen in the body is very, very different depending on each type of parasite. So in the next slide, we'll see some parasite evasion strategies just because there are so many different types of parasites. But again, you see that our T helper 1 responses can be really important. Antibodies can prevent binding to tissues. They can activate complement. They can lead to phagocytosis. They can, when you get IgE that binds, you get the release of histamines and toxic substances that can kill the parasite. You get increased mucus production to kind of just push them out. We do have some intracellular parasites where, again, you get the T helper 1 response that can help promote inflammation, which is good and bad, but can also help clear the parasite. We get granulomas that form, and we'll talk more about granulomas. And of course, you get some of your granulocytes that can come in and dump out, those kinds of compounds. So it's tricky, I guess, is kind of the easiest way to say that. It's tricky to fight parasitic infections, but we will talk about a few and how they can, how our immune system can help us fight them. But then, of course, as with everything, just like we talked about with viruses, we'll talk about with the different bacteria, we'll talk about with some of the fungi. We have evolved mechanisms to fight these organisms, and they have evolved mechanisms to fight us back or to hide from us. And so these are listed here. And as we talk about some of these specific parasites, I don't think we talk about all of them, but we'll talk about most of these actually. We'll talk about how they can evade the immune system. And so what we're looking at here is kind of this idea of like what happens when you have a nematode in the gut. So this is like a worm, like a macroscopic worm. So you get the antigens that come into the body. They activate eventually T helper 2 and B cell responses. B cells can secrete antibodies that will help coat them. The helper T cells and also the antibodies can activate mast cells. Remember, mast cells are a type of granulocyte. And so what they're trying to show here is like what's in those granules is like pumped out and can lead to damage to the worm. So this is going to be like your histamines and various other compounds. You can also get non-specific inflammatory responses like goblet cell proliferation. And remember, in the gut, goblet cells are really important for mucus. And so you increase your mucus secretion. So now you have this like damaged worm, you have increased mucus, and hopefully you can expel the worm. And when we're talking about gut nematodes, when they are expelled from the gut, you can often see them. Okay, so lastly, one of the things that we'll talk about throughout the semester as we talk about various pathogens is what happens when a patient has an immunodeficiency. There are two types of immunodeficiency. There's primary immunodeficiency, which means it's inherited. You were born with an immunodeficiency. This can be very severe. The most severe forms are called SCID, SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency, which can be a total lack of an immune system. Colloquially, sometimes people call these like bubble boy syndrome. Or it could be relatively mild, such as the inability to produce IgA, like a single type of antibody. And so, what you will have to think about is, well, let's say it's mild, like the person just can't make IgA. Well, will that predispose them to certain kinds of infections? Which type of infections, right? So you need to think about those types of things and reflect on them as you're thinking about this week's content. Secondary immunodeficiencies are considered acquired, and these can be permanent, such as those caused by HIV infection. There are other infections that can lead to suppressed immune systems, and that can be temporary. For example, a lot of times we see patients who get a viral infection like flu or even COVID. And while your body's trying to fight that particular infection, and maybe even once you've cleared it, your immune system is kind of low because it spent all its time and energy and proliferation trying to fight this one type of infection. And that can predispose you to secondary types of infection, like a bacterial pneumonia. Pregnancy can lead to temporary immune suppression. Surgery, injury, all of these things can lead to like a temporary type of immunodeficiency. But again, things like HIV would cause a permanent immunodeficiency. Other things that can cause immune deficiency would be drugs. So patients who, I don't mean like illicit drugs, I mean prescription drugs. So patients who are undergoing chemotherapy, that can suppress the immune system. Patients who've had organ transplants generally take drugs to suppress the immune system. And so, patients who have had an organ transplant generally have to take those drugs for the rest of their lives. So I guess that would be considered kind of a permanent immunodeficiency. But if they stop taking the drugs, if they stop undergoing chemotherapy, the immune system generally will bounce back.